I remember exactly where I was standing when I heard my husband tell his colleague that I was just a trophy wife who got lucky. Standing in our kitchen, hidden behind the door, I felt my world collapse as 15 years of marriage suddenly appeared in a completely different light. But life has a funny way of turning the tables. 5 years later, he's sorting mail in the basement of the company I now run. Sometimes karma doesn't just knock, it kicks the door down. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from, and if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. My name is Amber Mitchell, and at 42, I'm the CEO of Horizon Solutions, one of Boston's fastest-growing tech consulting firms. But my story begins long before corner offices and board meetings, back when I was Amber Collins, a bright-eyed, computer science major with big dreams. I met Ryan Mitchell during my final year of college. He was 3 years older, already working at a prestigious financial firm, and had the kind of confidence that filled a room. Our first meeting was at a networking event where he was representing his company. While other recruiters were dismissive of female tech graduates, Ryan listened intently to my ideas about emerging data security protocols. He asked for my number before I left, saying he wanted to continue our discussion over dinner. We married 2 years later. Those early days were everything I'd imagined a partnership could be. Ryan celebrated my accomplishments as I secured a position at a small but innovative tech startup. "You're going to change the world someday, Amber," he would say, raising a glass of champagne to toast my latest achievement. The shift was gradual, so subtle I almost didn't notice it happening. Ryan's career at the financial firm was advancing rapidly. Vice president by 30, he was on track for the C-suite, and our lifestyle reflected his success. We moved from our modest apartment to a sprawling colonial in Brookline. Ryan drove a luxury car, wore designer suits, and cultivated connections with Boston's elite. Meanwhile, I remained dedicated to my work at the startup, even though my salary was a fraction of Ryan's. I believed in what we were building, security solutions for small businesses that couldn't afford enterprise-level protection. The hours were long, the recognition minimal, but the work fulfilled me. "You know, you could quit that little job of yours," Ryan suggested one evening as I worked late on code. "It's not like we need the money." "It's not about the money," I replied. "This is important work." He shrugged. "Sure, if tinkering with computers makes you happy. Not everyone needs the career validation I do." Comments like these became more frequent. At social events with Ryan's colleagues, he began introducing me differently. "This is my wife, Amber. She likes to keep busy with her little tech project." Or, "Amber has a cute hobby job at a startup. It keeps her out of trouble." I confronted him once after a particularly belittling introduction. "Why do you talk about my career that way? You know how hard I work." Ryan seemed genuinely confused. "I'm complimenting you. Most of these guys' wives just shop and do charity lunches. I'm saying you're different." I let it go, believing him. Maybe I was being too sensitive. After all, he had always supported my ambitions in private. The startup began gaining traction in our 4th year. Our security solution caught the attention of industry leaders, and investment offers started coming in. As one of the core developers, I was integral to these discussions. The late nights increased, my stress levels rose, but so did my excitement. We were on the verge of something extraordinary. During this critical period, Ryan's behavior at home changed. He became irritable about my schedule, questioning why I needed to be so involved. "Let the guys handle the investment meetings," he said when I mentioned an upcoming presentation. "You've done the technical work. They can do the business side." "I'm part of the founding team," I explained. "My presence matters." "Come on, Amber. We both know they keep you around because you're good window dressing. A woman in tech is great for their diversity image." His words stung, but I dismissed them as stress talking. Ryan was in the middle of a major acquisition at his firm. He wasn't himself. The critical moment came during a dinner party at our home. Ryan had invited senior executives from his company and their spouses. I had spent all day preparing, despite having a major code release the following morning. Conversations flowed, and someone asked about my work. Before I could answer, Ryan jumped in. Amber's little startup is having its moment in the sun. She enjoys keeping her hand in tech, though, honestly, she doesn't need to work. I think she just likes having something on her resume. The table chuckled politely. I forced a smile and excused myself to check on dessert. In the kitchen, I leaned against the counter, breathing deeply to calm the storm brewing inside me. That's when I heard Ryan's voice again, closer now, speaking to someone who had followed him to retrieve another bottle of wine. Between us, Mark, I got lucky. I found myself a trophy wife who can actually hold a conversation about something other than interior design. Sure, she insists on keeping that startup job, but it keeps her happy and makes me look progressive to the board. Win-win. The wine glass in my hand nearly slipped. Trophy wife? The word echoed in my mind, reshaping 15 years of memories in an instant. Has that always been how he saw me? As an accessory to his success story? I served dessert that night with mechanical precision, smiling and playing the perfect hostess while internally, something fundamental was shifting. The next morning, instead of confronting Ryan, I went to my little startup job and channeled every ounce of hurt into the code release. Over the next few weeks, I observed Ryan with new awareness. The way he showcased me at events like a prize. How he always managed to diminish my work while appearing supportive. The subtle redirections when conversations centered on my accomplishments for too long. 3 months after overhearing Ryan's trophy wife comment, our startup received an acquisition offer from a major tech corporation. The terms were generous, including executive positions for the founding team. When I told Ryan about the offer and my potential new role as chief security officer, his reaction was revealing. That's nice, honey. But you don't need that kind of stress. Why not take the money and step back? We could travel more. This is what I've been working toward for years, I said. Come on, be realistic. You think they're offering you an executive position based on merit alone? Companies need female executives for their reports. It's politics. His words crystallized everything I had been feeling. This wasn't support, it was containment. I'm taking the position, I stated firmly. Ryan's expression hardened briefly before shifting to an indulgent smile. If that's what you want to play at, sure. Just don't let it affect our home life. I accepted the offer the next day. My new role came with significantly increased responsibilities, longer hours, and a salary that, for the first time, exceeded Ryan's. His congratulations felt hollow. As I immersed myself in the new position, our home life strained. Ryan's comments became more overtly dismissive. Another late meeting? I'm beginning to think they're just having you sit in these rooms to fill some quota. Or, the board must love having someone who looks like you to put in their annual report. Photos. I stopped defending myself and started making mental notes instead. 6 months into my new role, opportunity knocked unexpectedly. The parent company was struggling with integration issues between their existing security infrastructure and our solution. The CEO called an emergency meeting of division heads, seeking ideas. The systems are fundamentally incompatible in their RAW. Current architecture, the CTO explained. We're looking at a 6-month delay minimum. I raised my hand. I think there's another approach. The room turned to me, some faces curious, others skeptical. I outlined a hybrid implementation I had been conceptualizing, one that would preserve the core strengths of both systems while creating new synergies. That's actually brilliant, the CTO admitted after I finished. Can you lead this? When I returned home that night, Ryan was waiting, irritation clear on his face. Your assistant called looking for you. I told her you were probably stuck in another pointless meeting. It wasn't pointless, I replied calmly. I've been asked to lead a critical integration project. Ryan scoffed. Integration project? Come on, Amber. We both know they're just shuffling you around to different diversity initiatives. Don't let it go to your head. For the first time, I didn't feel hurt by his dismissal. I felt something closer to pity. Think whatever you want. Ryan, the integration project was a trial by fire, but ultimately a resounding success. My solution not only worked, but reduced implementation time from the projected 6 months to 10 weeks. The financial impact was substantial enough to be highlighted in the quarterly earnings call where the CEO mentioned me by name. After that, things moved quickly. I was invited to more strategic meetings. My input was sought on issues beyond security. When the company decided to create a new innovation division, I was offered the leadership role. 2 years after joining, I was promoted to the executive leadership team as Chief Innovation Officer. A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now, back to where we left off. Ryan's attitude evolved from dismissive to resentful. Our home became a battleground of passive-aggressive comments and increasing silence. He stopped attending company events with me, claiming they were boring tech talks, despite having never complained when I accompanied him to financial industry functions. The final breaking point came during a rare dinner at home together. Ryan had been drinking more than usual, nursing his third scotch as I mentioned an upcoming international conference where I would be a keynote speaker. You know why they keep promoting you, right? He slurred slightly. It's because you're decorative. You're their perfect package, technically competent enough to not embarrass them, but mainly there to show how progressive they are. I set down my fork. Is that what you think, or what you need to believe? It's what everyone thinks, Amber. You were a decent coder. But this executive stuff? Come on. You're riding the diversity wave. Like I've been riding your coattails all these years? I asked quietly. Just a trophy wife who got lucky? His face registered shock, then anger. You heard that? That was years ago, and taken out of context. There is no context that makes that acceptable, Ryan. But thank you for finally being honest. It makes my next decision much easier. I filed for divorce the following week. Ryan was blindsided, alternating between rage and desperate attempts to reconcile. You're throwing away 15 years over one comment? No, I explained during a mediation session. I'm acknowledging that we want fundamentally different things. You want a supportive accessory. I want a partnership of equals. The divorce was finalized in 8 months. I kept the house, which I had been paying the mortgage, on anyway since my salary increased, while Ryan moved to a luxury apartment downtown. We divided assets equitably, and I even felt generous in the settlement, wanting a clean break more than I wanted to fight over possessions. During this period, my career continued its upward trajectory. The innovation division I led became the company's fastest-growing segment. My team filed multiple patents, and our solutions were implemented across major industries. I was featured in technology magazines and invited to speak at conferences around the world. Then came the industry earthquake. Our parent company's CEO announced his retirement, and the board initiated a search for his replacement. To everyone's surprise, including my own, my name appeared on the short list of candidates. The interview process was grueling, multiple rounds with the board, presentations of my vision for the company's future, scrutiny of my leadership style and results. Throughout it all, I refused to believe it could actually happen. Surely they would choose someone with more traditional credentials, one of the long-tenured male executives from other divisions. I was having dinner with my parents when the call came. The board chair's voice was formal, but warm. We'd like to offer you the position of Chief Executive Officer, effective next quarter. My mother watched in confusion as I sat in stunned silence, tears streaming down my face. Amber? Is everything okay? She asked when I finally hung up. I'm the new CEO, I whispered, the words feeling foreign on my tongue. The announcement made headlines across business and technology publications. Amber Mitchell named CEO of tech giant blazed across my news feeds. Congratulations poured in, from colleagues, friends, and industry peers. One message was notably absent. Ryan's. Not that I expected one. We hadn't spoken since finalizing the divorce. But through mutual connections, I heard he was struggling professionally. The financial firm had undergone restructuring, and his position had been eliminated in the process. The timing couldn't have been worse for him. The divorce had depleted his savings, and his expensive lifestyle left little financial cushion. I threw myself into the CEO role, working to prove the board's faith in me was justified. The learning curve was steep, but I surrounded myself with talented people who complemented my skills. Under my leadership, the company expanded into new markets and deepened its technological advantage. 3 months into my tenure, my assistant informed me that Ryan Mitchell had applied for an open position in corporate communications. "You're Ryan Mitchell?" she asked, clearly aware of our history. I paused, considering the implications. "The position reports to whom?" "Director of Corporate Communications, ultimately up to the CMO. Process his application according to standard procedures," I instructed. "No special treatment, positive or negative." 2 weeks later, the HR director requested a meeting. Ryan's application had reached the final round, but background checks had raised concerns about his termination from his previous employer. Officially, it was part of restructuring, the HR director explained. Off the record, there were complaints about his management style and some questionable decision-making. "What does the hiring manager think?" I asked. "He likes Ryan's financial industry experience but feels he's overqualified for the position and might become frustrated quickly." I considered this information carefully. What alternative positions might be appropriate? HR mentioned several openings, including an administrative role in the mailroom, a position that would utilize Ryan's organizational skills while requiring less specialized knowledge of our industry. Forward his application to that department. If they're interested, I decided. But be transparent about the salary and responsibilities. If he declines, that's his choice. To my surprise, Ryan accepted the mailroom position after several unsuccessful months of job hunting. His first day coincided with an all-hands meeting where I would be presenting our quarterly results. As I walked onto the stage and saw him, in the back row, wearing a company ID badge and an expression of barely concealed shock, our eyes met briefly. I didn't acknowledge him during the presentation, focusing instead on celebrating the company's achievements and outlining our path forward. Afterward, as employees approached me with questions and comments, I noticed Ryan hovering at the edges of the crowd, seemingly uncertain whether to approach. Eventually, the room cleared, and he stepped forward. "Congratulations, Amber," he said stiffly. "You've done well for yourself." "Thank you, Ryan. I hope you find your position here fulfilling." He flinched slightly at my professional tone. "It's temporary. I have several opportunities in finance I'm exploring." I nodded, neither challenging nor encouraging him. "I wish you success with those. If you'll excuse me, I have another meeting." As I walked away, I heard him call after me, his voice carrying a note of desperation I'd never heard before. "This is quite the reversal, isn't it? Me working for you?" I turned back, measuring my words carefully. "Life has a way of revealing what people are truly capable of, Ryan. Sometimes it just takes the right circumstances for everyone to see it clearly." That brief exchange with Ryan in the conference hall marked the beginning of a strange new chapter in our lives. For weeks afterward, I didn't see him. The mailroom was in the basement, and my office was on the top floor, a physical distance that symbolized how far our paths had diverged. News of our connection inevitably spread through office gossip. I noticed the curious glances from employees who had pieced together that the new mailroom clerk was the CEO's ex-husband. To their credit, My executive team never mentioned it directly, though my chief of staff, Vanessa, once remarked, "It takes a remarkable level of professionalism to allow that situation." "Everyone deserves an opportunity to earn a living," I replied simply. "His performance will be evaluated like any other employee's." What I didn't share was the complex mix of emotions I felt knowing Ryan was sorting mail 3 floors below my corner office. Not satisfaction exactly. I had never wished failure on him. Not pity, though there was something undeniably poignant about his fall from financial glory. What I felt was a profound sense of closure, as if the universe had orchestrated the perfect epilogue to our story. 3 months into Ryan's employment, his supervisor requested a meeting with HR. I was briefed afterward as a courtesy, given our history. "Mr. Mitchell is struggling with certain aspects of the role," the HR director explained. His supervisor reports that he frequently makes comments about being overqualified and has difficulty taking direction, particularly from younger team members. "What does his supervisor recommend?" I asked. "A formal performance improvement plan. He believes Mr. Mitchell could be an asset if he can adjust his attitude." I nodded. "Proceed according to standard protocols." "There's one more thing," the HR director added hesitantly. "Mr. Mitchell has requested a transfer to corporate strategy. He claims his background in finance would be valuable there." The request was bold, bordering on delusional given his performance issues. "Has he gone through proper channels?" "No. He approached the department head directly at the company picnic. The department head was uncomfortable." I considered this information carefully. "Inform Mr. Mitchell that all transfer requests must follow established procedures, including satisfactory performance in his current role for a minimum of 6 months. His supervisor should address this during the performance review." The following week, I was working late when a knock came at my office door. Ryan stood in the doorway, still in his mailroom uniform, his expression a mixture of determination and discomfort. "Do you have a minute?" he asked. Professional boundaries dictated I should redirect him to HR, but curiosity won out. Briefly, he stepped inside, eyes widening as he took in the expansive office with its floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Boston skyline. "Nice setup." "Thank you. How can I help you, Ryan?" He straightened his shoulders. "I think there's been a misunderstanding about my transfer request. I'm not being taken seriously downstairs." "I understand you've been having some challenges adapting to your current position," I replied evenly. His face flushed. "That's exactly my point. I'm wasted in the mailroom. You know what I'm capable of." "Do I?" The question hung between us, weighted with 15 years of history. "Amber, this is beneath me," he said, gesturing to his uniform. "We both know I should be in a management position." I leaned back in my chair. "What I know is that you accepted the terms of employment offered to you. If you're interested in advancement, the process is the same for you as for any employee. Demonstrate excellence in your current role, apply through proper channels, and compete fairly for openings." "This is personal," he accused. "You're enjoying this. This isn't about you and me, Ryan. This is about running a company where rules apply equally to everyone." He laughed bitterly. "That's rich. The woman I supported for years while she built her career is now lecturing me about fairness." The revisionist history was breathtaking. "Is that how you remember it? Interesting." "I always believed in you," he insisted. "Believing in someone and undermining them are mutually exclusive, Ryan. You called me your trophy wife while dismissing my career as a hobby. That's not supported." His expression shifted, a flash of genuine confusion crossing his features. "I was complimenting you. Most of the guys I worked with had wives who what? Weren't capable of independent achievement. What was your metric for a compliment?" He fell silent, seemingly at a loss for words. "Ryan, I need to finish these quarterly projections. If you want to discuss your career path, please schedule time with HR or your supervisor." After a moment, He nodded stiffly and turned to leave, pausing at the door. "You've changed, Amber." "No," I corrected gently. "I just stopped accepting your version of who I was." After that encounter, Ryan seemed to adopt a new approach. Reports from the mailroom indicated improved performance. He stopped making disparaging comments and began completing tasks efficiently. His supervisor noted the change in his monthly report, speculating that Ryan had finally accepted his position. I knew better. Ryan was strategic when motivated. This wasn't acceptance, it was tactical adjustment. 6 months to the day after starting in the mailroom, Ryan submitted a formal application for a financial analyst position that had opened in East, our Treasury Department. His application was complete, professional, and followed all protocols. His mailroom supervisor provided a positive reference, noting his recent improvement. The hiring committee included him in the interview pool based on his prior financial experience, though they noted concerns about his limited tenure with our company. When the interview results reached my desk as part of routine executive reviews, I was not surprised to see that Ryan had performed well, landing in the top 3 candidates. The final decision rested with the Treasury Director, who ultimately selected another candidate with more relevant industry experience. The rejection letter to Ryan was standard and professional, encouraging him to continue seeking advancement opportunities that aligned with his skills. 2 days later, Vanessa intercepted me as I arrived at the office. "You should know that Ryan has filed a formal complaint with HR alleging unfair hiring practices." The complaint was more sophisticated than I had expected. Ryan claimed that his prior relationship with me was resulting in discrimination, not from me directly, but from managers who feared hiring the CEO's ex-husband would be viewed unfavorably. He's requesting that an independent committee review all his future applications to ensure fairness, Vanessa explained. And he's implied that he might need to seek external remedies if this isn't addressed. The threat of legal action was thinly veiled. I sighed, disappointed but not surprised. "Schedule a meeting with legal and HR. We'll address this properly." The resulting 3-hour meeting with our general counsel and HR leadership was thorough. We reviewed every document related to Ryan's employment, from his initial application to the recent rejection letter. Our legal team found no evidence of discrimination but recommended creating a special review process for his future applications to preempt any possible claims. "It sets a concerning precedent," I noted. "It does," our general counsel agreed. "But it might be less disruptive than litigation, even if his claims are unfounded." I reluctantly approved the recommendation. Ryan would get his independent review committee, a small victory that seemed to satisfy him for the moment. Weeks passed, and I immersed myself in a major acquisition negotiation that demanded my full attention. My interactions with Ryan were limited to occasional glimpses in the hallway or cafeteria, where he now nodded politely instead of avoiding eye contact. The acquisition was finalized successfully, bringing a smaller specialized security firm under our corporate umbrella. As part of the integration, we created several new positions, including a financial operations manager role that would oversee budgeting for the new division. Ryan applied, and, with his background in finance, made it to the final round of interviews. His special review committee confirmed that the process was fair, and to everyone's surprise, perhaps even his own, he was offered the position. The promotion meant Ryan would be moving from the basement to the 15th floor, 3 levels, below my office, but worlds away from the mailroom. His salary nearly tripled, though it remained well below his previous earnings at the financial firm. When the announcement went out, I received a brief email from him. "Amber, I wanted to thank you for the opportunity to advance within the company. I recognize that my initial approach was inappropriate, and I appreciate the fair consideration my application received. Best regards, Ryan." The message was professional, almost corporate in its tone. I responded in kind, congratulating him on the new position and expressing confidence in the department's choice. Ryan's first months in financial operations brought mixed reports. His technical skills were solid, as expected. His interpersonal approach, however, remained problematic. Female team members reported that he frequently interrupted them in meetings or restated their ideas as his own. His supervisor, a capable woman named Diane, who had been with the company for a decade, noted that he often bypassed her to present his analyses directly to the division head. During his first quarterly review, Diane addressed these concerns directly. Ryan's response was revealing. "I'm just trying to ensure my work gets appropriate visibility. There's already a perception that I only got this job because of my connection to Amber, the CEO. Your work will be recognized based on its merit," Diane assured him. "But undermining colleagues or circumventing reporting structures isn't the way to advance here." Ryan seemed to take this feedback seriously, making visible efforts to collaborate more effectively. He began acknowledging contributions from team members and following proper channels for presenting his work. The adjustment appeared genuine, until a company-wide leadership conference revealed otherwise. The conference was held at a resort in Vermont, bringing together 200 managers and executives for strategic planning sessions. As CEO, I delivered the opening keynote, outlining our vision for the coming year. Ryan sat in the middle of the audience, attentive but unobtrusive. During an evening networking reception, I overheard his voice from a nearby group of mid-level managers. The conversation had turned to career advancement. "The game is different now," Ryan was saying. "It's all about visibility and managing perceptions. Take it from someone who's seen both sides. I went from the mailroom to management in less than a year because I learned how to work the system." "Any specific tips?" someone asked. "Find the right sponsor. Someone higher up who can advocate for you, preferably a woman. They're all about mentoring these days." I moved away before he could notice me, a familiar disappointment settling in my chest. Ryan hadn't evolved. He had merely adapted his strategy. The experience validated every decision I had made in ending our marriage. The leadership conference concluded with departmental breakout sessions where teams presented innovative solutions to current challenges. Ryan's financial operations team proposed a new budgeting approach for the acquired security division that drew positive attention. The chief financial officer mentioned the proposal in the closing session, crediting the entire team rather than any individual. Afterward, the CFO approached me directly. The financial operations team did impressive work. The Mitchell guy in particular has a solid grasp of how to integrate disparate budgeting systems. He has a strong financial background, I acknowledged neutrally. He mentioned he knew you from before his time here, the CFO continued. Said you were acquaintances from the industry. Acquaintances. An interesting revision of our 15-year marriage. We have history, I replied simply. But I'm pleased he's finding his place here based on his own merits. The CFO nodded, seemingly satisfied with this diplomatic response. Another 6 months passed. Ryan settled into his role, his performance evaluations consistently meeting expectations without exceptional distinction. He became known for solid technical work, coupled with an occasionally difficult personality. In short, he became just another manager in a large corporation, neither failing nor rising rapidly. Then came the security breach. A sophisticated attack targeted our client data, potentially compromising sensitive information from multiple Fortune 500 companies. Our cybersecurity team detected the intrusion quickly, but containing and assessing the damage required all hands on deck. As CEO, I established an emergency response team drawing experts from across the company. Ryan's financial operations role meant he had access to client billing information that could help identify which accounts had been targeted. His supervisor recommended him for the team based on his familiarity with the relevant systems. For 2 weeks, the response team worked around the clock. Personal histories and office politics were set aside in service of the crisis. Ryan proved surprisingly effective, his financial expertise providing valuable insights into the attacker's targets. During one late-night session, as we reviewed affected accounts, Ryan identified a pattern that had eluded others. "They're not targeting the largest clients," he pointed out. "They're focused on clients with specific types of intellectual property." His observation shifted our containment strategy, allowing for more targeted interventions. When the crisis finally abated, with minimal data compromised and no public disclosure required, I acknowledged the entire team's contributions, including Ryan's pattern recognition. In the aftermath, Ryan seemed different, more engaged, less political. His next performance review reflected this shift, with Diane noting his improved collaboration and genuine contribution to team objectives. A month later, he requested a meeting through official channels. When he arrived at my office, his demeanor lacked the entitlement of his previous visit. "Thank you for making time," he began. "I wanted to discuss something personal, with your permission." I gestured for him to continue. "Working on the security breach response made me reflect on a lot of things," he said carefully. "Seeing you lead during a crisis, it reminded me of your potential. The potential I always claimed to see but never truly supported." I remained silent, waiting. "I owe you an apology, Amber. A real one. Not the superficial acknowledgments I've made before." He met my gaze directly. "I undermined you throughout our marriage. I called you my trophy wife because it was easier than acknowledging that you might be more capable than me in ways that mattered." The admission hung between us, unexpected and unadorned. "Why are you telling me this now?" I asked finally. "Because I need to say it, and you deserve to hear it," he replied. "I've spent the past year trying to prove something. To you, to myself, to everyone here. But watching you handle the breach response showed me what real leadership looks like. It's not about titles or perceptions. It's about rising to challenges and bringing others along with you." I studied him, searching for hints of manipulation, and finding none. "I appreciate your candor, Ryan. I'm not asking for forgiveness or reconciliation," he clarified. "Those ships have sailed. I just wanted you to know that I see it now, what I should have seen years ago." As he stood to leave, I found myself offering a genuine response. "It takes courage to acknowledge blind spots, Ryan. That's something I learned early in my career, but it's never too late to learn it." He nodded, a flicker of the man I had once loved visible briefly in his expression. "Congratulations on building all this, Amber. It's extraordinary, and entirely yours." After he left, I stood by the window overlooking the city, reflecting on the journey that had brought us both to this moment. From college sweethearts to bitter exes to CEO and middle manager, roles neither of us could have anticipated when we set our vows. Ryan continued his work in financial operations, neither seeking special treatment nor causing further issues. We maintained a professional distance, nodding politely when our paths crossed in hallways or meetings. Office gossip about our history eventually faded as newer, more interesting rumors emerged. 6 months after our conversation, Ryan accepted a position with another company, a lateral move that offered him a fresh start without the shadow of our history. His resignation letter was professional and appropriate. His exit interview mentioned the valuable experience he had gained and the skills he was taking to his new role. On his last day, a small envelope appeared on my desk. Inside was a handwritten note. "Amber, as I start this new chapter, I wanted to thank you for an unexpected one. Working at your company taught me more than financial operations. It taught me to see people, especially women, as they truly are, not as I need them to be. You were never a trophy. You were always the champion. Wishing you continued success." I placed the note in my desk drawer, neither dwelling on it nor discarding it. Some chapters end cleanly, others leave margins of unwritten possibilities. The company continued its upward trajectory under my leadership. I occasionally thought of Ryan when passing the mailroom or during executive meetings in the conference room where he once sat in the audience. Not with regret or vindication, but with a quiet acknowledgement that sometimes people need to lose everything to see what was in front of them all along. A year later, I received a business magazine that featured a profile on women reshaping corporate America. The interview explored my journey from startup developer to CEO, my leadership philosophy, and the challenges I had overcome. The journalist had asked about balancing personal and professional life. My quoted response ended the article. I learned that the right partner elevates you, the wrong one diminishes you, and sometimes the most difficult experiences reveal your true capacity. In the end, no one can define your worth but you. And that's a lesson worth every struggle it took to learn it. I never knew if Ryan read that article. Part of me hoped he did, not because I needed him to see my success. I had long since moved beyond seeking his validation, but because the wisdom it contained had been earned by both of us, through 15 years of marriage and its aftermath, through triumph and humiliation, through the basement mailroom and the top floor office. Some might call it poetic justice, that my once dismissive husband ended up working beneath me. But life is more complex than poetry or justice alone can capture. What happened between Ryan and me wasn't about winning or losing. It was about finally seeing each other clearly, without the distorting lens of expectation or insecurity. And, in that clear-eyed recognition, we both found something valuable. He found humility, and I found the unshakable certainty that I had always been more than someone's trophy. 3 years after Ryan's departure, Horizon Solutions had nearly doubled in size. We'd expanded into international markets, opened offices in Singapore and Berlin, and launched a revolutionary security platform that was quickly becoming the industry standard. Business publications regularly featured us in their companies to watch segments, and I had settled comfortably into my role as CEO, the initial whispers about my rapid rise having faded into respect for consistent results. My personal life has evolved as well. The divorce from Ryan had left emotional scars that took time to heal, but eventually I found myself open to new connections. I dated occasionally, though never with the intensity of my marriage. My closest relationship was with a fellow tech executive named Daniel, who understood the demands of leadership and respected the boundaries I had established. We enjoyed each other's company without the pressure of defining our future, a refreshing change from the predetermined path my life with Ryan had followed. On a crisp autumn morning, I was reviewing acquisition proposals in my office when Vanessa interrupted with an unusual message. Amber, Sarah Winters from Tech Forward magazine is online too. She says it's regarding their 30 Most Influential Women in Tech feature. I recognize the publication, a respected industry journal known for its thoughtful profiles rather than superficial listicles. I'll take it, I replied, curious. Sarah's voice was warm and professional. Ms. Mitchell, thank you for taking my call. I'm pleased to inform you that our editorial board has selected you as one of our 30 Most Influential Women in Tech for this year. I'm honored, I replied genuinely. Your publication has always highlighted substantive work rather than personalities. That's precisely why I'm calling directly, Sarah continued. We don't just want to list your accomplishments. Those are well documented. We're interested in the personal journey behind them, particularly how you've navigated industry challenges as a woman in leadership. I hesitated, wary of how personal stories could be sensationalized. What exactly are you looking for? An in-depth interview exploring your path to becoming CEO, including obstacles you've overcome. Our readers, especially young women entering tech, find these honest accounts invaluable. Her sincerity resonated with me. Throughout my career, I'd benefited from women who shared their unvarnished experiences, helping me avoid pitfalls and recognize systemic barriers for what they were. I'd be happy to participate, I decided, with the understanding that I'll have final approval on quotes attributed to me. Absolutely, Sarah agreed. Would you be open to addressing your experience with workplace gender dynamics? We've heard rumors about your ex-husband once working at Horizon after your divorce. The directness of her question surprised me. Few journalists had been bold enough to broach that topic. What specific angle are you exploring there? We're examining how successful women navigate personal and professional boundaries, especially when those lines blur. Your situation presents a unique perspective many readers could learn from. I considered her request carefully. The story of Ryan's time at Horizon had remained largely private, known only to company insiders and a few industry colleagues. Making it public would mean surrendering a piece of personal history to broader consumption. Yet there was potential value in sharing that experience, not as a vindictive exposé, but as an illustration of the subtle undermining many women face and the strength required to overcome it. I'm willing to discuss aspects of that experience, I said finally, but I won't vilify individuals or share certain private conversations. Sarah seemed to appreciate my boundaries. We scheduled an interview for the following week at my office, and I spent the intervening days reflecting on what parts of my story I was comfortable sharing publicly. When Sarah arrived, she was younger than I expected, early 30s, with a sharp intelligence in her eyes that reminded me of myself at that age. We settled in the conference room adjacent to my office, with Boston's skyline providing a dramatic backdrop. The interview began professionally, covering my education, early career, and vision for Horizon's future. Sarah's questions were thoughtful, focusing on strategic decisions and industry trends. As we established rapport, the conversation gradually shifted toward more personal territory. Many profiles describe your rise to CEO as meteoric, Sarah noted, but I suspect the reality was more complicated. I smiled at the understatement. Success rarely follows a clean upward trajectory. Mine certainly didn't. Can you elaborate? I spent years having my contributions minimized, I explained. Early in my career, I was often the only woman in technical meetings. My ideas would be overlooked until a male colleague repeated them. Later, as I moved into leadership, I faced the double bind many women encounter, being perceived as either too aggressive or not assertive enough. Sarah nodded in recognition. Did you find that these professional challenges mirrored dynamics in your personal relationships? The question was artfully posed, open enough for me to navigate comfortably, while directly addressing what she really wanted to know. There are parallels, I acknowledged. When patterns of dismissal or diminishment become familiar in one context, you sometimes tolerate them in others. It took me years to recognize how my professional confidence was being undermined in my marriage. Is it true that your ex-husband later worked at Horizon? Sarah asked, her tone carefully neutral. Yes, Ryan was employed here for about 18 months. That must have created an unusual dynamic. I measured my response. It was certainly unexpected. He applied through normal channels during a difficult period in his career. The company evaluated his qualifications like any other candidate. And you approved his hiring? I didn't block it, I clarified. There's a difference. Leadership means trusting your processes and your people. Our HR department determined he was qualified for an entry-level position, so he was hired. Sarah seemed intrigued by this distinction. Many executives might have found that situation too uncomfortable to allow. Comfort rarely drives growth, I replied, whether in individuals or organizations. Did his presence create challenges for you as CEO? I considered the complexity of those months with Ryan in the building. It required careful professional boundaries, but life often places us in proximity to our past. The question is whether we let it distract us from our future. He began in the mailroom, correct? Sarah pressed gently. That was the position he was qualified for at the time, I confirmed, keeping my tone matter of fact. And later moved into financial operations? Yes, after following the standard advancement procedures. Sarah studied me for a moment. There's a certain poetic element to that trajectory, from dismissing your career to working beneath you in the corporate hierarchy. I met her gaze steadily. I understand why people might find that narrative satisfying, but leadership isn't about poetic justice. It's about creating environments where talent is recognized and developed, regardless of personal history. That's remarkably generous, Sarah observed. It's pragmatic, I corrected. Holding grudges consumes energy better directed elsewhere. The conversation shifted to broader industry challenges, but Sarah returned to the personal thread near the end of our 2-hour discussion. Throughout your career, what has been the most valuable lesson you've learned about navigating gendered expectations? The question deserved thoughtful consideration. I've learned that other people's perceptions of your limitations aren't facts. They're hypotheses waiting to be disproven. Early on, I spent too much energy trying to change those perceptions directly. Eventually, I realized that excellence is the most effective rebuttal. Would you say that philosophy applied to your marriage as well? In retrospect, yes. I was fighting for validation in a relationship where my value had already been determined and limited. The breakthrough came when I stopped seeking external confirmation of my worth. Sarah nodded, jotting notes. That resonates with many women's experiences, though few have the opportunity to see their former spouses work in their mailrooms. I laughed softly at her persistence. Life has a remarkable capacity for unexpected turns. The key is recognizing which plot twists contain valuable lessons. After the interview concluded, Sarah thanked me for my candor. This will provide a valuable perspective for our readers, especially those facing similar undermining in their relationships or careers. Just be sure to emphasize that success isn't about proving others wrong, I added. It's about proving yourself right. 2 weeks later, Vanessa brought me an advance copy of the magazine. My profile occupied 4 pages, thoughtfully written and mercifully free of sensationalism. Sarah had handled the Ryan chapter of my story with surprising delicacy, presenting it as one example of the subtle ways women's capabilities are often diminished by those closest to them. The article concluded with my quote about proving yourself right rather than others wrong, followed by Sarah's observation. Mitchell's journey from underestimated spouse to respected CEO illustrates how excellence ultimately speaks for itself. Perhaps the most powerful testament to her leadership isn't that her ex-husband once sorted mail in her company's basement, but that she created an organization where even those who once diminished her could find opportunities to contribute based on merit alone. I set the magazine aside, satisfied with the portrayal, but already focused on the quarterly earnings call scheduled for that afternoon. The past had its place, but the present demanded my attention. The tech-forward profile generated unexpected ripples. Interview requests multiplied, most seeking elaboration on the personal elements of my story rather than Horizon's technological innovations. I declined most, preferring to keep the spotlight on our company's work rather than my private history. 1. Invitation, however, stood out. A speaking engagement at Westridge Academy, my former high school. The computer science teacher had read the profile and believed my journey would inspire her students, particularly the young women considering tech careers. The opportunity to influence the next generation proved too meaningful to refuse. Returning to Westridge was surreal. The building had been renovated, but the essence remained familiar. The same institutional green lockers, the same trophy cases celebrating athletic achievements, while academic honors were relegated to less prominent displays. The computer lab where I had spent countless hours coding while classmates socialized had evolved from clunky desktops to sleek workstations, but the energy of curious minds exploring digital possibilities remained unchanged. Ms. Peters, the computer science teacher, welcomed me warmly. "Your story has already made an impact," she confided. 3 girls who were considering dropping CS have decided to continue after reading about you. The presentation room filled quickly with students and faculty. Standing at the podium, I surveyed the audience, particularly the teenage girls trying to appear casually disinterested while their alert postures betrayed genuine curiosity. I sat where you're sitting 25 years ago, I began, convinced. That success in tech meant becoming one of the guys, hiding my gender, my interests, my full self behind code and algorithms. I believed that to be taken seriously, I needed to be seen as a programmer first, a woman never. Several girls nodded, in quiet recognition. That approach works until it doesn't, I continued. You can earn temporary acceptance by diminishing parts of yourself. But lasting success comes from integration, not amputation. The perspectives you bring as young women aren't handicaps to overcome, they're assets to leverage. I shared stories from my early career, the subtle exclusions, the challenges finding mentors, the persistent need to reprove my technical capabilities. I described the startup years, where my contributions were simultaneously essential and minimized. Then I paused, considering whether to include the personal elements that had featured in the magazine profile. The attentive faces before me made the decision clear: these young women deserved the complete picture, not a sanitized version. The professional challenges women face often mirror dynamics in our personal lives, I acknowledged. For 15 years, I was married to someone who publicly supported my career while privately undermining my confidence. He introduced me as his trophy wife to colleagues, dismissed my work as a cute hobby, and attributed my promotions to diversity initiatives rather than merit. The room grew notably still. I internalized those messages longer than I care to admit. Even as I advanced professionally, part of me questioned whether I truly deserved my success or had simply benefited from lucky timing and lowered standards. Girl in the front row spoke up unexpectedly. How did you know when to leave? The directness of her question suggested personal relevance. When I finally recognized that his perception of me wasn't a reflection of my capabilities, but of his insecurities. The moment I understood that truth, staying became impossible. Another student raised her hand. The article mentioned he ended up working at your company later. Wasn't that awkward? I smiled at the teenage framing. Beyond awkward. But sometimes the most uncomfortable situations offer the greatest clarity. Watching him struggle with reporting to female managers illustrated exactly what he had feared in our marriage, that women's competence might equal or exceed his own. Did you fire him? A boy called from the back, earning disapproving looks from teachers. No. His performance determined his trajectory, just like any employee. The company wasn't a vehicle for personal vendettas. But you could have, another student pointed out. You were the CEO. I could have, I agreed. And that would have confirmed every dismissive thing he ever said about women in leadership. That we're emotional, vindictive, unable to separate personal feelings from professional decisions. True power isn't about exercising every option available to you. It's about choosing which options align with your values. The questions continued for another 30 minutes, ranging from technical queries about security protocols to curiosity about how I balanced professional demands with personal life. Throughout, I emphasized that success required not just technical excellence, but the courage to value your own judgment above others' limitations of you. After the formal presentation, several students lingered, including the girl who had asked about knowing when to leave. She approached hesitantly. My dad tells my mom her job is just a hobby. She confided quietly. He says she should be grateful he lets her work at all. The familiar pattern made my heart ache. That must be difficult. For both of you to hear, she nodded. Mom just laughs it off, but I can tell it hurts her. She has a master's degree in chemistry. Sometimes people diminish others because they fear being diminished themselves, I offered. Understanding that doesn't excuse it, but it might help. You see that her value isn't determined by his assessment. I want her to come hear you speak, the girl said decisively. There's an evening session for parents, right? Yes, at 7. I'd be honored to meet her. That evening, the girl returned with a slender woman whose tentative smile couldn't hide the intelligence in her eyes. This is my mom, Dr. Lewis. She's a research chemist. Dr. Lewis extended her hand. Rebecca. And despite what my husband says, my work developing cancer treatments is definitely not a hobby. Amber Mitchell. And no, saving lives rarely qualifies as a hobby. We shared a moment of understanding before the evening presentation began. Afterward, Rebecca approached again, this time alone. Thank you for sharing your story. It resonated. I'm glad it was meaningful, I replied, recognizing the careful consideration in her expression. My daughter thinks I should leave her father, Rebecca said quietly. She doesn't understand the complexities. No one from the outside ever does, I acknowledged. Every situation has its own calculus. Did you regret it? Leaving? The question deserved honesty. I regretted not leaving sooner. But the timing has to be right for you, not for anyone else. Rebecca nodded thoughtfully. Your ex-husband, did he ever recognize what he'd done? Eventually, I confirmed. But I didn't leave because I thought he would change. I left because I had changed. I no longer needed his approval to recognize my own worth. That's the part I'm still working on, Rebecca admitted. It comes with practice, I assured her. Start small. Trust your expertise in one meeting, correct? One dismissive comment, make one decision without seeking validation. The confidence builds incrementally. 6 months after the school presentation, I received an email from Rebecca Lewis. She had accepted a leadership position at a pharmaceutical company in Philadelphia, relocating with her daughter but not her husband. Your story wasn't the reason. I left, she wrote, but it helped me imagine a different possibility for my life. Her message reminded me why sharing difficult personal experiences matters, not as cautionary tales or revenge narratives, but as permission for others to envision new futures for themselves. Around the same time, an unexpected email arrived from Ryan. He had seen the tech-forward profile and wanted to thank me for my restraint in discussing our history. You could have painted me as the villain, he wrote. Instead, you used our story to illustrate larger patterns without demonizing me personally. That generosity says more about your character than my mailroom stint ever could. I sent a brief acknowledgement, appreciating the evolution in his perspective without needing to reopen closed chapters. As Horizon continued its expansion, my personal narrative gradually receded from public interest, replaced by analysis of our technological innovations and market strategy. Occasionally, new employees would discover the mailroom husband story through industry gossip, their wide-eyed reactions suggesting they viewed it as corporate mythology rather than recent history. I neither confirmed nor corrected these rumors, understanding that stories evolve to serve the needs of their audiences. For some, the account of a dismissive husband sorting mail beneath his ex-wife's corner office represented poetic justice. For others, it illustrated the redemptive possibility of growth after failure. The truth encompassed both interpretations and neither. Ryan and I had enacted a common dynamic, a man underestimating a woman's potential, a woman internalizing that limitation until something catalyzed her awakening. What made our story unusual wasn't the pattern, but its visible resolution, played out across 15 floors of corporate hierarchy. 5 years after Ryan left Horizon, I received an invitation to speak at a conference on women's leadership in Chicago. Scanning the agenda out of professional courtesy, I noticed his name among the panelists for a session titled Male Allies Supporting Women's Advancement. The irony might have stung once. Now, it simply confirmed what I had long suspected, that our shared history had transformed us both, though in different ways. For me, The transformation had been about recognizing and claiming my inherent value. For Ryan, perhaps it involved acknowledging the limitations of his previous perspective. I declined the conference invitation due to scheduling conflicts, but sent a brief message to the organizer. Consider adding Ryan Mitchell to your keynote lineup. His journey from unconscious underminer to conscious advocate represents exactly the evolution corporate America needs. Whether Ryan ever learned of my recommendation, I never discovered. Our paths no longer intersected except through occasional, professional references. He had become what we all eventually become to former partners, a character in the story of how we become ourselves, neither villain nor hero but simply human, limited by his own unexamined assumptions until life demanded a broader vision. As for me, I continued building Horizon into an industry leader while mentoring young women navigating their own professional journeys. When they asked about overcoming gender barriers, I shared practical strategies developed over decades of experience. And when they asked how I had found the courage to value myself despite external dismissal, I told them the truth. Sometimes the people closest to us can only see reflections of their own limitations. The breakthrough comes when you realize that their vision is impaired, not your potential. My ex-husband calling me a trophy wife didn't define me. It defined the narrowness of his perception. And in the end, the greatest victory wasn't watching him work in my mailroom. It was no longer needing his approval to recognize my own worth. 10 years after founding Horizon Solutions, I faced the most significant decision of my career. Our company had grown beyond my wildest expectations. 5,000 employees across 3 continents, a valuation exceeding $3 billion, and technology protecting data for over 40% of Fortune 500 companies. We had reached a crossroads familiar to many successful startups: remain independent or merge with a larger entity that could accelerate our global expansion. Globetech, a Silicon Valley giant, had approached with an acquisition offer that recognized our value and promised considerable autonomy. The terms were generous, the strategic fit logical. As CEO, the final recommendation to our board would fall heavily on my shoulders. During this period of intensive analysis and negotiation, an unexpected email appeared in my inbox with the subject line, "Congratulations on the potential acquisition." The sender, Ryan Mitchell. I hesitated before opening it, curious what perspective my ex-husband might offer on this corporate milestone. Our communication had dwindled to occasional professional acknowledgments since his departure from Horizon. The last I'd heard, he'd established himself as a mid-level executive at a financial services firm in Denver, a respectable recovery from his career nadir in our mailroom. His message was surprisingly thoughtful. Amber Industry News suggests Horizon may soon join the Globetech family. Having witnessed your leadership firsthand, I know whatever decision you make will serve the company's best interests. Looking back, I realize I never truly understood what you were building. I saw a startup when you were creating an institution. I measured success by quarterly bonuses while you were thinking about decades. Whatever path you choose, know that at least one former skeptic now recognizes the vision I once failed to see. Best regards, Ryan. The message contained no requests, no subtle bids for insider information or reconnection, just a straightforward acknowledgement from someone who had once dismissed my ambitions. I sent a brief but cordial reply thanking him for his support, then returned to the all-consuming acquisition analysis. After weeks of due diligence and strategic planning, I called a special meeting of Horizon's executive team. We gathered in our main conference room, floor-to-ceiling windows showcasing the Boston skyline that had witnessed our growth from scrappy startup to industry leader. Before we finalize our recommendation to the board, I began, I want each of you to share your unfiltered perspective. This decision impacts not just our investors, but every employee who has contributed to building Horizon. Opinions varied predictably along departmental lines. Our chief financial officer emphasized the premium valuation and shareholder returns. the chief technology officer worried about maintaining our innovative culture within a larger organization. Our chief marketing officer saw opportunities in GlobeTech's global reach, while HR expressed concerns about potential workforce reductions. After everyone had spoken, all eyes turned to me. These leaders had joined Horizon at different stages of our journey, but each had demonstrated the blend of technical excellence and human insight I valued most. The question before us isn't simply whether to accept GlobeTech's offer, I said carefully. It's whether Horizon has completed its independent mission or still has chapters to write on its own. I stood and walked to the window, gathering my thoughts against the backdrop of the city. When I founded this company, I was driven partly by the desire to prove something, to myself, to an industry dominated by men, to a husband who viewed my ambitions as hobby projects. That motivation served its purpose during our early years, getting us through difficult moments when pragmatism might have suggested a different path. My team listened attentively. Most knew fragments of my personal history through company lore, or the occasional profile piece, but I rarely discussed it directly in professional settings. But Horizon has grown beyond any personal vindication. We've built something that matters not because of who was proven wrong, but because of what we've proven right. That security can be both powerful and accessible. That diverse teams create better solutions. That ethical technology is good business. I returned to the table, meeting each person's gaze directly. After careful consideration, I believe our mission remains unfinished. The acquisition offers financial rewards but potentially compromises the values and vision that define us. My recommendation to the board will be to decline GlobeTech's offer and pursue independent growth through our planned international expansion. The relief in several faces confirmed my instinct that many shared this preference, but had hesitated to advocate against the seemingly inevitable march toward acquisition. We spent the remainder of the meeting outlining our continued independence strategy, energized by the prospect of maintaining control over Horizon's future. The board meeting the following week was more contentious. Several investors had been counting on the acquisition's immediate returns, and my recommendation required convincing them to maintain their longer-term commitment. After 4 hours of spirited debate, the board voted narrowly in favor of independence, contingent upon meeting aggressive growth targets for the coming year. As news of our decision reached the industry, reactions were mixed. Some analysts praised our confidence and independence. Others questioned rejecting such a premium offer in an uncertain market. Internal response was overwhelmingly positive. Employees celebrated maintaining our culture and mission with a spontaneous gathering that evolved into an impromptu company party. Amidst the celebration, my phone buzzed with another message from Ryan. Choosing independence over the easy path. That sounds like the Amber I knew before I tried to reshape her. Horizon is fortunate to have a leader who values mission over convenience. Well done. His continued interest in Horizon's journey was curious. After a moment's hesitation, I replied with a simple question. Why do you keep following our company's developments? His response came quickly. Learning from past mistakes. Watching you lead Horizon has been the most educational experience of my career, seeing what might have been possible had I supported rather than diminished the most talented person I've known. The candor was unexpected. After considering several possible responses, I simply wrote, growth comes from recognizing our blind spots. We all have them. Some blindness is willful, he countered. Mine was. The exchange ended there, but it prompted reflection on how completely our roles had reversed from those early marriage years. Now he was the one seeking validation, acknowledging his failures, while I had the luxury of measured graciousness from a position of success. The irony wasn't lost on me, but neither was it particularly satisfying. Ryan's belated recognition of my capabilities didn't heal old wounds or validate my journey. That validation had come from within years ago, when I finally understood that external approval, whether from a spouse, an industry, or investors, was ultimately less meaningful than my own assessment of my worth. The months following our independence decision brought intense focus on meeting the growth targets promised to our board. I traveled extensively, establishing our European headquarters in Berlin and laying groundwork for Asia-Pacific expansion from our Singapore office. 18-hour days became routine as we pursued aggressive market penetration while maintaining our technological edge. During a particularly grueling week in Tokyo, I received an unexpected invitation. The Women's Leadership Coalition was holding their annual summit in Denver the following month, focusing on female executives who had overcome significant barriers. They requested I deliver the keynote address, sharing insights from my journey building Horizon while navigating gender-based challenges. Under normal circumstances, I might have declined due to scheduling constraints, but the location caught my attention: Denver, Ryan's current city. Part of me wondered if his recent messages indicated a desire for closure or conversation after all these years. After confirming the summit dates wouldn't conflict with critical business objectives, I accepted the invitation. The summit organizers arranged accommodations at Denver's historic Brown Palace Hotel. After arriving and settling in, I reviewed my keynote notes, refining points about authentic leadership and institutional resilience. My speech deliberately omitted specific references to Ryan or our personal history, focusing instead on systemic challenges women in technology often face. The evening before the summit, I dined alone in the hotel restaurant, enjoying a rare moment of solitude amid my packed schedule. Midway through my meal, a familiar voice broke my concentration. "Amber? I thought that might be you." Ryan stood beside my table, older but still recognizable, silver threads now prominent in his dark hair, lines around his eyes deeper than I remembered. He wore a well-tailored suit, the confidence in his posture more subdued than during our marriage. "Hello, Ryan," I replied, surprised despite having considered this possibility. "Are you dining here?" "Meeting a client. I saw you as I was leaving." He hesitated. "I don't want to intrude on your dinner, but I couldn't walk past without saying, 'Hello.'" The awkwardness was palpable. Two people with 15 years of shared history and 5 years of strained distance, standing in a restaurant filled with strangers unaware of the complex narrative unfolding before them. "Would you like to sit for a moment?" I offered, surprising myself with the invitation. He nodded, taking the chair across from me. "I heard you're speaking at the Leadership Summit tomorrow." News travels fast. Denver's business community isn't that large, he explained, and a CEO of your caliber visiting gets noticed. The conversation paused as a waiter refreshed my water and inquired whether Ryan would be joining me. He declined politely, indicating he'd already dined. "How's Denver treating you?" I asked when we were alone again. "It's been good. Different pace from Boston. Smaller pond, less pressure." He smiled slightly. "And fewer reminders of past mistakes." I nodded, understanding the appeal of geographical distance from difficult memories. "Your recent messages suggested you've been following Horizon's progress," I observed. "I follow all major security firms," he replied, then added more honestly, "But yes, I pay particular attention to Horizon." Professional interest mixed with personal regret creates a powerful monitoring incentive. "Regret?" I echoed, curious about his framing. Ryan met my gaze directly. "For years I convinced myself I was supportive of your career. Revisionist history is remarkably comforting until something forces you to confront reality." "What was your reality check?" I asked. "Working at Horizon," he answered without hesitation. "Watching you lead, seeing other male executives make the same dismissive comments I once made, but this time from the outside. It was like watching a recording of myself that I couldn't edit or delete." His candor deserved reciprocal honesty. That period wasn't easy for either of us. "The difference is that my difficulty was self-inflicted," Ryan acknowledged. Yours was imposed by a husband who couldn't recognize the extraordinary person he had married. This level of self-awareness would have meant everything during our marriage. Now, it was simply an interesting data point about his personal growth. We all have our blind spots, I offered, repeating my earlier message. That's generous of you. But my treatment of you wasn't a blind spot. It was a deliberate diminishment. He straightened in his chair. I don't expect or deserve forgiveness, Amber. I just want you to know that I recognize what I did. The moment stretched between us, years of unspoken tension crystallizing into this unexpected conversation. Thank you for that, I said finally. Recognition matters. He nodded, seeming to understand that this acknowledgement, while meaningful, didn't erase history or create obligation for renewed connection. I should let you finish your dinner, he said, rising. Good luck with your keynote tomorrow. Though I doubt you need luck at this point. It was clarifying to see you, Ryan. Likewise. He paused before adding, Horizon made the right choice staying independent, by the way. Globetech's acquisition record is littered with innovative companies they've essentially dismantled. I appreciate the validation, I replied with a small smile, though we've established I no longer require it. He laughed softly, recognizing the callback to our earlier patterns. Touché. Good night, Amber. After he departed, I sat with my thoughts, processing the unexpected closure our brief exchange had provided. The Ryan I had just spoken with seemed genuinely transformed from the dismissive husband who had once called me his trophy wife or the resentful employee sorting mail in Horizon's basement. Whether that transformation was complete or performative wasn't mine to judge, nor did it particularly matter to my life now. The following morning, I delivered my keynote to a packed ballroom of women leaders from across industries. I spoke about resilience, innovation, and the power of defining success on your own terms. While I didn't share specific personal anecdotes, the principles drawn from my experiences resonated clearly with the audience. Leadership isn't about titles or organization charts, I concluded. It's about the courage to pursue your vision when others can't yet see it. Sometimes the most important person to convince is yourself, to believe in your capabilities even when those closest to you question them. The standing ovation that followed was gratifying, but more meaningful were the conversations afterward with young women executives facing their own versions of the challenges I had navigated. I recognized in their questions the same uncertainties I had once harbored, about belonging, about worthiness, about balancing assertiveness with likability in environments still governed largely by male expectations. As the summit concluded, the organizer handed me a sealed envelope. Someone asked me to give you this after your speech. Inside was a brief note in familiar handwriting. Your keynote reminded me why Horizon thrives, authentic leadership that values substance over appearance. The company reflects its founder, uncommonly resilient, genuinely innovative, and ultimately unstoppable once unleashed from artificial constraints. The business world is better for having your voice in it. The note contained no requests or expectations, just an acknowledgement from someone who had once constrained that voice, but now recognized its value. I tucked it into my portfolio alongside speaker notes and business cards collected throughout the day. That evening, my flight back to Boston offered rare thinking time without meetings or calls interrupting. I reflected on the strange symmetry of my journey, from a husband who dismissed my ambitions to industry leadership that even he now acknowledged. The narrative arc was satisfying, but I recognized that focusing too heavily on this validation risked replacing one external approval source with another. True empowerment had come not when Ryan recognized my value or when the industry awarded titles and magazine profiles, but in the quiet moment years earlier, when I decided my worth wasn't contingent on anyone else's assessment. Everything significant, from leaving my marriage to declining Globetech's acquisition offer, stemmed from that fundamental realization. Upon returning to Boston, I initiated Horizon's next evolution. We expanded our board to include more diverse perspectives, established a foundation supporting women in STEM education, and launched an incubator for security startups founded by underrepresented entrepreneurs. These moves weren't mere social responsibility gestures, but strategic investments in fostering the kind of innovation that had made Horizon successful. 6 months later, Ryan's financial services firm announced his promotion to Chief Strategy Officer. I sent a brief professional congratulations, which he acknowledged with equal professionalism. Our occasional exchanges maintained this careful cordiality, neither ignoring our history nor attempting to redefine our connection. During our Horizon's 15th anniversary celebration, we created a digital time capsule preserving key moments from our company journey. Employees contributed memories, photographs, and artifacts, representing milestones both public and personal. As CEO, I was asked to include a message for future leadership that captured the essence of our organizational identity. After considerable reflection, I wrote, Horizon began as many companies do, with technical innovation addressing an unmet need. But our lasting impact stems from something less tangible than algorithms or architecture. We've built an environment where capability matters more than category, where substance consistently outweighs superficial assessment. I founded this company during a period when I was regularly introduced as someone's trophy wife, despite holding multiple patents and a computer science degree. That experience taught me how easily talent can be obscured by others' limited perspectives, and how essential it is to create spaces where potential isn't predetermined by appearance or background. To those leading Horizon in years to come, remember that our most valuable security product isn't our technology, but our culture, one that recognizes excellence regardless of its packaging. Protect that culture as fiercely as we protect our clients' data, and Horizon will continue expanding possibilities long after our current solutions have been rendered obsolete by the very innovation we champion. The message wasn't about Ryan, specifically, though our history had undeniably shaped my leadership philosophy. It was about recognizing how personal challenges can forge institutional strengths when transformed through perspective and purpose. As Horizon continued its growth trajectory, industry publications occasionally revisited the Mailroom husband chapter of our corporate mythology. These stories typically framed it as a triumphant reversal, the underestimated wife becoming the powerful CEO, the dismissive husband reduced to sorting mail in her company's basement. While this narrative satisfied a certain appetite for poetic justice, I understood that the true story was more nuanced. Ryan's time in our mailroom wasn't the climax of my journey, but merely one visible manifestation of a broader pattern being disrupted. The more significant transformation wasn't his demotion, but my liberation from seeking validation I had never actually needed. When asked about this chapter in interviews, I increasingly redirected focus to the organizational principles it had helped shape. Our meritocratic evaluation systems, our emphasis on demonstrable results over projected potential, our consistent investment in overlooked talent. The personal anecdote had value primarily as a foundation for institutional practices that outlived its relevance. 20 years after founding Horizon, I began planning my transition from CEO to board chair, identifying internal candidates who could lead the company's next phase of growth. My most promising successor was Melissa Chen, a brilliant security architect who had joined us as an intern and risen through technical and leadership ranks to become our chief product officer. During her final interview, Melissa asked an unexpected question. The story about your ex-husband working in the mailroom has become part of company lore. Did that experience influence how you evaluate leadership potential? I considered her question thoughtfully. It taught me that capability and confidence don't always align. Some of our most talented team members doubt their readiness for advancement, while others overestimate their qualifications. Effective leadership requires looking beyond both self-promotion and self-doubt to identify genuine capacity for growth. And your ex-husband? she pressed gently. Did he ever recognize what he had missed seeing in you? Eventually, I confirmed. But the more valuable recognition was my own. Understanding that his assessment had never defined my potential, only his perception. Melissa nodded. That's the lesson that resonates most from your leadership. That we determine our worth through our work and integrity, not through others' limited understanding of who we are. Her insight confirmed she was ready for the CEO role. 3 months. Later, we announced my transition to executive chair and her promotion to chief executive officer, effective following quarter. The succession was met with industry approval and employee enthusiasm, particularly from women who had joined Horizon specifically because of our reputation for recognizing talent regardless of packaging. During the transition period, I received one final email from Ryan. Congratulations on your chairmanship and on selecting Melissa Chen as your successor. Horizon's industry leadership clearly extends to succession planning as well. Looking back over these 20 years, I'm struck by how completely I misunderstood what you were building. Not just a company, but an entirely different model for recognizing and developing talent. The husband who called you a trophy wife became the mailroom clerk in your company. A journey that contained exactly the humility lesson I needed. But the truly remarkable story was never about my downfall or your ascension. It was about your vision for an organization that values substance over appearance, consistently and systematically. That vision has transformed an industry. More importantly, it's changing how the next generation measures worth, their own and others. You were never a trophy, Amber. You were always the prize. I read his message twice, appreciating the perspective it reflected. After brief consideration, I replied, "Thank you, Ryan. We all have roles to play in each other's stories. In mine, you taught me to trust my own assessment above others' limitations. Perhaps the most valuable lesson of my career. I hope you've found similar clarity in yours." His response was simple. I have. And unlike the lesson I taught you, mine came with the benefit of being true. Our exchange ended there. Not with dramatic confrontation or tearful reconciliation, but with quiet acknowledgement of parallel growth spanning decades. Two people who had once diminished each other, one through deliberate undermining and one through accepting that diminishment, had eventually found their proper dimensions. As I prepared to transition daily operations to Melissa, I reflected on the strange circular journey from being introduced as Ryan's wife who tinkers with computers to having Ryan known primarily as Amber Mitchell's ex-husband who once worked in her mailroom. Neither characterization captured our full humanity, but the shift illustrated how thoroughly perspectives can realign when artificial constraints are removed. The most meaningful outcome wasn't that Ryan eventually recognized my capability or that industry accolades validated my vision. It was that thousands of employees at Horizon experienced daily confirmation that their contributions mattered regardless of their backgrounds or appearances. That substance consistently outweighed superficial assessment in determining their opportunities. From a husband's casual dismissal had emerged an institutional commitment to seeing people clearly. From a trophy wife label had come an organization that prized authentic talent above decorative potential. The personal slight had catalyzed a corporate culture now recognized as industry-leading. Sometimes the most powerful responses to diminishment aren't dramatic confrontations but quiet reconstructions, building environments where the very assumptions that limit you become impossible to maintain. My legacy wasn't proving Ryan wrong, but creating spaces where talent like mine would never again be dismissed as merely decorative. The trophy wife had built something her husband never envisioned, not just personal success that eclipsed his own, but a systematic approach to valuation that made his entire framework obsolete. 5 years into my role as executive chair of Horizon Solutions, I found myself at a crossroads both professionally and personally. At 65, retirement beckoned with its promises of long-deferred travel and passion projects. Yet I remained deeply connected to the company I had built from nothing. Under Melissa Chen's capable leadership, Horizon had continued its upward trajectory, expanding into emerging markets and pioneering quantum-resistant security protocols that set new industry standards. My official responsibilities had been reduced to quarterly board meetings and occasional strategic guidance, allowing me the freedom to establish the Mitchell Foundation, a nonprofit focused on providing technology education and mentorship to women from underserved communities. The foundation had quickly become my second act, channeling both my resources and experience toward addressing the systemic barriers I had faced decades earlier. On a crisp autumn morning, I was reviewing scholarship applications at the foundation's Boston headquarters when my assistant interrupted with unusual news. "Amber, there's a documentary filmmaker here to see you. She doesn't have an appointment, but she's quite persistent." Curious about this unscheduled visitor, I agreed to a brief meeting. Moments later, a young woman with a confident stride and intelligent eyes entered my office. "Ms. Mitchell, thank you for seeing me. I'm Jordan Matthews from Perspective Films." She handed me a business card. "I'm developing a documentary series on pioneering women in technology, and your story is central to the narrative we're building." I had fielded similar requests over the years, typically declining to keep focus on Horizon's technology rather than my personal journey. "I appreciate your interest, Ms. Matthews, but I generally avoid participation in personal profiles." "This isn't just about your individual achievements," she countered. "We're examining how women like you fundamentally reshaped organizational cultures despite formidable barriers. Your experience, from being dismissed as a trophy wife to creating one of the most inclusive tech companies, provides a unique window into both obstacles and solutions." Something in her articulation of the project resonated differently than previous approaches. "What specifically interests you about Horizon's culture?" "Your company has the highest retention rate for women in technical roles across the industry," Jordan replied without hesitation. "While other firms implement superficial diversity initiatives, Horizon has systematically eliminated the invisible barriers that typically derail women's advancement. That transformation didn't happen accidentally." Her research impressed me. These statistics weren't prominently featured in our public materials, but reflected an organizational priority I had quietly championed. "Who else are you including in this series?" I asked. She named several pioneering women across technology sectors, some contemporaries I knew personally, others from younger generations whose work I admired. The roster was thoughtfully curated, focusing on substantive impact rather than mere visibility. "You've done your homework," I acknowledged. "What would participation involve?" "Primary interviews with you, conversations with colleagues who witnessed Horizon's evolution, and access to archival materials that illustrate key moments in your journey." She paused. "Including, if you're comfortable, exploring how your experience with your ex-husband influenced your leadership philosophy." The directness of her request was refreshing. That chapter of my story has been sensationalized enough over the years. "Which is precisely why we want to approach it differently," Jordan explained. "Not as tabloid fodder about revenge or comeuppance, but as the catalyst for organizational principles that created lasting change. The mailroom husband anecdote matters not because it's dramatic, but because it sparked systematic approaches to recognizing talent regardless of packaging." Her framing suggested a depth of understanding that most interviewers lacked. After further discussion about the project's scope and approach, I conditionally agreed to participate, reserving final approval rights over my segments, a standard stipulation for any media engagement. The initial filming session took place 2 weeks later at the Foundation offices. Jordan's interview style was methodical, beginning with my early technical education and gradually exploring the evolution of my leadership philosophy. Rather than focusing exclusively on gender barriers, she examined how various experiences had shaped my approach to organizational structure and talent development. "Many profiles frame your story as triumphant revenge, the underestimated wife becoming the powerful CEO while her dismissive husband sorts mail in her basement, Jordan observed toward the end of our second session. But that narrative seems reductive based on our conversations. Revenge makes for compelling headlines, I acknowledged, but poor organizational principles. If my leadership had been motivated primarily by proving others wrong, Horizon would have reflected that limitation. What was your actual motivation? She asked. I considered the question carefully. Creating environments where capability couldn't be obscured by category, where what you could contribute mattered more than how you were perceived. My experience being dismissed despite demonstrable skills wasn't unique to my marriage. It reflected patterns I'd encountered throughout my education and early career. And Ryan working in your mailroom was coincidental rather than orchestrated, I clarified. He applied during a difficult period in his career, and our HR department evaluated his qualifications according to standard protocols. The irony wasn't lost on either of us, but it wasn't the point of the story, just its most dramatic visual. Jordan nodded thoughtfully. Would you be open to us interviewing him for his perspective on that period? The request surprised me. You'd need to approach him directly. We've had minimal contact over the years. But you wouldn't object to his participation? No, I decided after brief consideration. Multiple perspectives create a more complete picture. What I didn't share was my curiosity about how Ryan might characterize that chapter in our intertwined narratives. Our occasional communications over the decades had suggested evolution in his understanding, but public reflection would require a different level of self-awareness. The documentary project progressed over several months, with Jordan's team interviewing longtime Horizon employees, industry colleagues, and even students who had benefited from the Mitchell Foundation's programs. They collected archival footage of early product launches, company milestones, and media appearances that traced our growth from startup to industry leader. 6 months into filming, Jordan requested another meeting. We've made contact with Ryan Mitchell, she informed me. He's agreed to an interview, but wanted to ensure you were comfortable with his participation before proceeding. The consideration was unexpected. Did he explain why? He said he didn't want to appear to be inserting himself into your narrative without permission. He specifically mentioned not wanting to colonize your story the way he once diminished your ambitions. The phrasing suggested a depth of reflection I hadn't anticipated. Tell him I have no objections to his participation. 2 weeks later, Jordan arrived for our scheduled session with an unusual energy. We interviewed Ryan yesterday, she explained as her team set up equipment. I thought you might want to know that his perspective was remarkably aligned with yours regarding that period. In what way? I asked, genuinely curious. He described his behavior during your marriage as systematic undermining disguised as support, a pattern he only recognized after experiencing similar treatment from senior executives when he fell from financial prominence. She studied my reaction carefully. He was remarkably candid about his failures and explicitly credited your leadership at Horizon with reshaping his understanding of talent recognition. While this echoed sentiments from our limited private exchanges over the years, his willingness to acknowledge these realizations publicly represented a significant step. Did he seem comfortable discussing that period? Comfortable isn't the word I'd choose, Jordan replied thoughtfully. Resolved, perhaps. He spoke like someone who had spent years processing difficult truths rather than avoiding them. Our interview that day explored my transition from CEO to board chair and the establishment of the Mitchell Foundation. Throughout, I found myself reflecting on the strange symmetry of Ryan publicly acknowledging his role in our history at this late stage, just as I was contemplating full retirement from Horizon and closure on that chapter of my life. The following week brought another unexpected development. My assistant forwarded an email from Ryan with the subject line, "Documentary Participation." His message was characteristically direct. Amber Jordan Matthews informed me you've approved my participation in the documentary. I wanted to thank you for that courtesy and assure you that I've been careful to respect the boundaries of your story while being honest about my own failures. During our interview, it became apparent that my recollections of certain periods might benefit from verification against contemporaneous evidence. With your permission, I'd like to review journals I kept during our marriage, which remain in storage at my sister's home in Brookline. These contain daily reflections that might provide more accurate context than memory alone. Given that these journals inevitably reference our shared history, I wanted to request your comfort level with this approach before proceeding. I'm committed to contributing constructively to this project without reopening wounds or revising history to flatter myself. Best regards, Ryan. The message reflected a consideration that would have been unimaginable during our marriage or even during his time at Horizon. After careful thought, I replied, Ryan, I appreciate your thoughtfulness in consulting me. Please feel free to reference whatever materials would help ensure accuracy in your recollections. This documentary project is ultimately about organizational transformation rather than personal history, but truth serves both objectives. Amber, his response came quickly. Thank you. Accuracy matters, especially when examining patterns we once perpetuated unconsciously. As the documentary production entered its final phases, Jordan shared that Ryan's journals had indeed provided valuable context for understanding the subtle ways professional women's contributions were systematically minimized, not just through overt dismissal, but through seemingly supportive language that nonetheless contained limiting assumptions. He documented conversations where he introduced you as my wife who keeps busy with her little tech project, Jordan explained during one of our final sessions. Reading those entries today, he recognized how consistently he positioned your work as auxiliary to his real career, even while believing himself supportive. That's the most insidious form of undermining, I observed. The kind that presents itself as encouragement while simultaneously establishing boundaries around what success can look like. Exactly. And what makes your leadership at Horizon significant is how systematically you eliminated those patterns from your organizational culture. The documentary series, titled Rewriting the Code: Women Who Transform Tech, was scheduled for release the following spring on a major streaming platform. Before final edits were locked, Jordan invited me to preview my segments, including portions of Ryan's interview that referenced our shared history. I watched alone in my home office as Ryan appeared on screen, silver-haired and measured in his delivery. The filmmaker had asked about his earliest recollections of my technical abilities. Amber was brilliant from the beginning, he stated without hesitation. We met at a recruiting event where she outlined security vulnerabilities that more experienced professionals hadn't identified. I recognized her talent immediately. That wasn't the problem. What was the problem? Jordan's voice asked from off-camera. I categorized her brilliance as an attractive quality rather than a professional identity, Ryan explained, his expression reflecting genuine self-examination. It was like appreciating a beautiful singing voice in someone you expect to pursue a real career elsewhere. I never doubted her abilities. I just constrained what those abilities should mean in her life. The camera lingered on his face as he continued. I called her my trophy wife to colleagues, believing it was somehow complimentary, suggesting I'd found someone decorative who could also discuss technical concepts. The condescension embedded in that framing is breathtaking in retrospect. Did you recognize this pattern? Jordan prompted. Intellectually? When I found myself working in the mailroom at her company years after our divorce. Nothing clarifies perspective like sorting mail in the basement of a building where your ex-wife occupies the corner office, he smiled ruefully. But truly understanding the impact of my behavior took much longer. Watching female colleagues experience similar dismissal, recognizing the patterns, gradually connecting those observations to my own actions. And how would you characterize Amber's response to having you work at her company? Rigorously fair, he replied without hesitation. She neither advantaged or disadvantaged me. I was evaluated according to the same standards as any employee, which was precisely the point. The systems she built at Horizon eliminated the subjective biases that typically prevent talent from being recognized when it appears in unexpected packages. The segment concluded with his most pointed reflection. The irony isn't that I ended up working in her mailroom. It's that I failed to recognize I was married to one of the most innovative minds in technology because I was too invested in seeing her as an accessory to my success rather than an architect of her own. Watching his interview was a surreal experience, hearing Ryan articulate with precision the dynamics I had struggled for years to name during our marriage. His self-awareness came decades too late to salvage our relationship, but validated the organizational principles I had built at Horizon. The documentary premiered at South by Southwest the following March to critical acclaim, with particular praise, for its nuanced exploration of how systemic barriers manifest in seemingly supportive environments. My segments received notable attention, but it was the juxtaposition of Ryan's candid self-assessment with Horizon's documented success in retaining female technical talent that generated the most substantive discussion among industry leaders. Following the premiere, a panel discussion featured several women profiled in the series, including myself. During the audience Q&A, a young software engineer raised her hand. "Ms. Mitchell, your ex-husband's reflection on calling you his trophy wife was particularly striking," she began. That language still exists in tech circles, just in updated forms like diversity hire, or suggestions that women are included for optics rather than ability. How did you maintain confidence in your capabilities despite that constant undermining? The truth is, I didn't. Not initially, I acknowledged. I internalized those limitations for years, questioning whether my accomplishments were truly merit-based or somehow the result of special accommodation. The breakthrough came when I stopped seeking external validation and began evaluating my contributions objectively against measurable outcomes. And how did that realization shape Horizon's culture? Another audience member asked. We built evaluation systems that measured demonstrable impact rather than perceived potential, I explained. When promotion criteria focus on verifiable contributions, rather than subjective assessments of leadership qualities or executive presence, many traditional barriers to advancement disappear. Those systems didn't just benefit women, they created pathways for talent that might otherwise be overlooked for countless reasons unrelated to capability. After the panel, as attendees mingled during the reception, I was approached by a familiar figure, Ryan looking somewhat tentative despite his formal attire. "Congratulations on the documentary," he offered. "Jordan created something remarkably substantive from our collected experiences." "Thank you for your contribution," I replied. "Your perspective added a valuable dimension to the narrative." An awkward silence stretched between us. Two people whose lives had been intricately connected for decades despite long periods without direct contact. "I wasn't sure if I should attend," Ryan admitted finally. "I didn't want to appear to be inserting myself into your professional recognition. Your participation in the documentary was relevant to its central thesis," I assured him. "Being here for its premiere is perfectly appropriate." He nodded, seeming to relax slightly. The panel discussion was powerful, especially your points, about measurable impact versus perceived potential. That framework would have served me well throughout my career. It would serve most organizations well, I suggested, though implementation requires confronting deeply embedded assumptions about what leadership looks like. Assumptions I exemplified, he acknowledged ruefully. "We all carry biases shaped by our environments," I offered. "The question is whether we recognize and address them when evidence contradicts our preconceptions." He considered this carefully. Some recognitions come too late to repair their damage. I understand that my current awareness doesn't erase years of undermining your confidence and capabilities. True, I agreed. But systems outlast individuals. The evaluation frameworks, Horizon developed because of those experiences now benefit thousands of employees who never knew our personal history. This perspective seemed to provide some measure of peace. You've built something remarkable, Amber. Not just a successful company, but an alternative model for recognizing and developing talent. That was always the point, I replied. Not proving. You wrong, but creating spaces where capability couldn't be obscured by category. As the evening concluded, we parted with the quiet acknowledgement of two people who had traveled parallel journeys of growth, albeit from very different starting positions. No dramatic reconciliation, no tearful apologies, just mutual recognition of how our shared history had catalyzed evolving understanding. The documentary's release generated renewed interest in Horizon's talent development practices. Melissa Chen, now firmly established as CEO, found herself fielding inquiries about our promotion criteria and evaluation systems from organizations seeking to replicate our success in retaining diverse technical talent. The Mitchell Foundation received increased applications for its mentorship programs, particularly from women navigating environments where their contributions were routinely minimized. 6 months after the premiere, as I finalized my complete retirement from Horizon's board to focus exclusively on foundation work, I received a package at my home address. Inside was a leather-bound journal with a brief note. Amber, while reviewing my old journals for the documentary, I discovered this unused one from our final anniversary, a gift I had purchased but never given as our marriage unraveled. It seems fitting that it should finally reach its intended recipient, albeit 25 years late. The documentary has sparked important conversations about recognition systems within my current organization. Several female colleagues have shared experiences eerily similar to what I once considered supportive behavior toward you. History repeats until we recognize the patterns. Your journey from dismissed spouse to industry leader, who systematically eliminated similar dismissal for others, represents the highest form of response to limitation, not personal vindication, but structural transformation. With continued respect for all you've built, Ryan, the empty journal symbolized possibilities never explored in our marriage, but perhaps realized in our separate paths forward. I placed it on my desk, considering what reflections might eventually fill its pages, not about past limitations, but about future systems that might prevent similar constraints for others. As retirement afforded more time for perspective, I found myself increasingly focused on the Foundation's work with young women entering technology fields. During mentorship sessions, I shared not just technical guidance, but strategies for navigating environments where their contributions might be routinely questioned or attributed to factors other than merit. Being underestimated can become your secret advantage, I told a particularly promising group of scholarship recipients. While others are busy dismissing your potential, you can quietly build skills and systems that eventually make their limitations irrelevant. Is that what happened with your ex-husband? One young woman asked boldly. Did being his trophy wife motivate you to prove him wrong? That's the simplified narrative, I acknowledged. But the truth was more nuanced. His dismissal wasn't the catalyst for my ambition that existed independently. But it shaped how I structured Horizon once I had the opportunity to build from scratch. How so? Another student inquired. I created what I had needed. An environment where contribution mattered more than category, where talent couldn't be obscured by preconception. The most meaningful response to limitation isn't personal success, but systematic transformation that prevents others from facing similar constraints. As I concluded my mentorship session, I reflected on the circular journey that had brought me. From dismissed spouse to industry leader to retirement focused on preparing the next generation. The trophy wife label that once diminished me had ultimately catalyzed organizational principles that created pathways for countless others whose talents might otherwise have remained unrecognized. The Mailroom husband chapter of my story had long since lost its emotional charge, transformed from personal wound to professional insight about how capability can be obscured by category, and more importantly, how systematic approaches can eliminate such obscuring. What remained was neither resentment nor vindication, but a profound appreciation for how limitation, when properly understood, can inspire systems that transcend it. The final scene of the documentary had captured this perspective perfectly. Filmed at Horizon's headquarters with the Boston skyline visible through floor-to-ceiling windows, the camera followed a diverse group of employees collaborating on a complex security solution. My voice narrated over the imagery. The measure of true leadership isn't personal advancement, but the systems you leave behind. Structures that recognize excellence regardless of its packaging, that evaluate contribution rather than conformity. Building those systems often requires experiencing their absence first, understanding precisely how talent gets obscured by category so you can systematically eliminate those obscuring factors. The camera then transitioned to a direct interview, shot as I concluded. Being called a trophy wife while holding multiple patents and a computer science degree wasn't a limitation. It was an education in how perception constrains potential. The most powerful response wasn't proving my ex-husband wrong, but creating environments where such dismissal becomes impossible. That transformation doesn't happen through individual success stories, but through systematic approaches to recognizing talent wherever it appears. As the credits rolled over this final statement, the documentary captured exactly what I hoped would be my legacy. Not the personal triumph of an underestimated wife over a dismissive husband, but the creation of systems that made such underestimation increasingly difficult to maintain for countless others whose capabilities might otherwise have remained unrecognized. The trophy wife had built something far more valuable than personal vindication, a blueprint for recognizing excellence regardless of its packaging, ensuring that future generations would encounter fewer artificial constraints on their potential than those that had initially limited my own. The success of the documentary unexpectedly thrust me back into the public eye at 70. Invitations to speak at conferences and universities flooded in, most focusing on Horizon's innovative talent development systems rather than the personal story that had inspired them. Though I had fully retired from Horizon's board by then, Melissa frequently consulted me about expanding these systems globally as the company continued its upward trajectory. During this period of renewed visibility, I received an intriguing email from Stanford University's business school. They were launching a new curriculum focused on inclusive leadership practices and wanted to develop a case study based on Horizon's evolution. After several discussions about their approach, I agreed to participate, with the understanding that the case would focus on systematic solutions rather than personal narratives. The professor leading the project, Dr. Eleanor Washington, approached her research with refreshing thoroughness. Rather than relying solely on my perspective, she interviewed dozens of long-tenured Horizon employees, industry analysts, and even competitors who had eventually adopted similar evaluation frameworks. What continues to fascinate me, Dr. Washington commented during one of our sessions, is how consistently Horizon outperforms industry averages in identifying high-potential talent that other organizations overlook. That's by design, I explained. Traditional talent identification relies heavily on pattern matching against previous success stories. If your previous leaders share certain characteristics, you unconsciously seek those same markers in new candidates, perpetuating homogeneity. And Horizon disrupted that cycle. We created evaluation protocols that temporarily blind reviewers to background factors while highlighting measurable contributions. The results consistently surprised even those of us who designed the system. Dr. Washington nodded thoughtfully. Several employees mentioned Ryan specifically, how his advancement from mailroom to financial operations became something of a case study within the company. Not because of your personal history, but because it demonstrated how the system could recognize capability even in unexpected packages. The observation gave me pause. I had never considered how Ryan's trajectory at Horizon might have served as an internal example of our merit-based advancement principles. The irony was striking. The very person whose dismissal had inspired these systems had inadvertently become evidence of their effectiveness. As the Stanford case study progressed, an unexpected communication arrived from Denver. Ryan had been diagnosed with early-stage Parkinson's disease and was considering documenting his professional journey before symptoms potentially advanced. He requested permission to reference his time at Horizon, particularly how the experience had transformed his understanding of talent recognition. "I want to ensure any memoir respects boundaries around our shared history," he wrote. "My focus would be on how Horizon's systems challenged my preconceptions about merit and potential, insights that reshaped my later career." His considerate approach reflected how completely our dynamic had evolved from those early marriage years. I sent a simple reply. "Your experiences at Horizon are yours to share. I trust your perspective after all these years." The Stanford case study was published the following spring to significant attention within business education circles. Titled, "Rebuilding Recognition: How Horizon Solutions Transformed Talent Identification," it detailed the specific mechanisms we had implemented to eliminate subjective biases from advancement decisions. The case became required reading at several prestigious MBA programs, ensuring that future business leaders would understand these principles regardless of whether they had experienced such limitations personally. During this period, the Mitchell Foundation expanded its programming to include corporate consulting on talent development frameworks. Organizations seeking to replicate Horizon's success in retaining diverse technical talent engaged our team to evaluate their existing systems and implement strategic changes. This work brought me to Silicon Valley frequently, where I collaborated with tech giants, finally recognizing the competitive advantage of more inclusive talent identification. During one such consulting trip, I received an unusual invitation. Ryan was delivering a guest lecture at Stanford on recognizing invisible barriers to advancement and had extended an invitation to attend if I happened to be in the area. After brief consideration, I decided to observe from the back row, curious about how he articulated these concepts after our decades of parallel evolution. The lecture hall was packed with students and faculty eager to hear from the former financial executive now known for championing systematic approaches to talent development within traditional industries. Ryan appeared slightly thinner than at the documentary premiere, with a barely perceptible tremor in his left hand that he acknowledged candidly in his opening remarks. Some of you may have seen the documentary where I admitted to dismissing my ex-wife's technical capabilities despite overwhelming evidence of her brilliance, he began. What you might not realize is how common that pattern remains in organizations today, accomplished professionals having their contributions minimized, through language that appears supportive while simultaneously establishing boundaries around what success can look like. He went on to outline specific linguistic patterns that signal such limitations. Technical women described as detail-oriented rather than strategic. Underrepresented groups praised for work ethic rather than insight. Accomplishments attributed to luck or timing rather than capability. I used every one of these diminishments with my ex-wife, he acknowledged. I called her my trophy wife who could talk tech, as if her computer science degree and multiple patents were decorative accessories, rather than substantive qualifications. And I genuinely believed I was being complimentary. As he detailed Horizon's systematic approaches to eliminating such biases from evaluation processes, I was struck by how completely he had internalized the principles we had developed. He articulated the mechanisms with precision, translating complex systems into actionable insights these future leaders could implement. Near the conclusion of his lecture, a student raised her hand. Given your personal connection to these issues, do you ever regret your previous perspective? Or is this just an intellectual evolution? Ryan considered the question thoughtfully. Regret implies you would choose differently with the same awareness. What I experienced was more fundamental, a complete recalibration of how I perceived capability and contribution. That journey from unexamined bias to systematic awareness isn't just intellectual. It requires confronting how your own advantages may have obscured others' capabilities. Following the lecture, students crowded around him with additional questions. I remained in my seat, intending to depart without interaction, but Ryan spotted me as the crowd thinned. "Amber," he acknowledged, surprise evident in his expression. "I didn't expect you to attend." "I'm consulting nearby," I explained simply. "Your articulation of our systems was impressively precise. They're elegant mechanisms once you understand the problems they're designed to solve," he replied, though I came to that understanding far later than I should have. We shared a moment of quiet recognition, two people whose conflicts had catalyzed insights neither could have developed independently. "The Foundation's consulting work sounds meaningful," he offered. "Implementing these systems from the outset rather than retrofitting them after problems emerge." "Prevention over correction," I agreed, though sometimes correction creates more robust prevention strategies. He smiled slightly at the oblique reference to our history. "Indeed it does." As we parted ways, there was a sense of completion that transcended our complicated past. The personal conflicts that had once defined our relationship had transformed into complementary approaches to addressing the same systemic issues. My work building more inclusive organizations from the foundation level, his efforts helping traditional institutions recognize their inherited limitations. The following spring brought an unexpected honor. Harvard Business School announced I would receive their Distinguished Leadership Award, recognizing not just Horizon's commercial success but the lasting impact of our talent development frameworks on business education and practice. The ceremony would include a symposium examining how these frameworks had influenced organizational design across industries. Standing at the podium accepting this recognition, I reflected on the journey from dismissed spouse to industry leader, to architect of systems that transcended my personal experience. The trophy wife label that had once diminished me had ultimately inspired organizational principles that created advancement pathways for countless individuals whose talents might otherwise have remained unrecognized. The most powerful response to limitation isn't individual success, I told the assembled business leaders, educators, and students. It's creating systems where such limitations become increasingly difficult to maintain. At Horizon, we built evaluation frameworks that recognize capability regardless of its packaging, not because it's morally superior, though it is, but because it's competitively advantageous. Organizations that systematically overlook talent inevitably lose to those that recognize it in all its diverse manifestations. As I concluded my remarks, I noticed Ryan seated in the audience, his presence a quiet acknowledgement of our intertwined journeys. Our eye contact lasted only a moment, but it contained decades of evolution, from the husband who dismissed his wife's ambitions to the advocate for systematic talent recognition, from the wife who internalized that dismissal to the architect of systems that made such diminishment increasingly unsustainable. No dramatic reconciliation or tearful closure, just mutual recognition of how completely we had both transformed, catalyzed by conflicts that ultimately expanded rather than diminished our perspectives. The trophy wife and the mailroom husband had each found their way to the same essential understanding, that true potential can only be recognized when we systematically eliminate the preconceptions that obscure it, and in that understanding lay the most meaningful resolution of all. Not personal vindication, but structural transformation that ensured others would encounter fewer artificial constraints than those that had initially limited us both. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.